Hello, my monstrosities. Hello once again. Today I bring to you a way to use this model. The Screamer Killer. Now, this is a model that, some people have quite the attachment for. Its early editions was an interesting looking figure. In the newest edition, got, some makeovers, whatnot, looking nice, but we haven't really had too many times to actually use the Screamer Killer because of the price. And before we get any further, I want to do the disclaimer of this is probably not competitive. It is, you could maybe run it at a RTT, maybe you're just him and you can run it at a GT. I'm not telling you this to give you the false sense of security that this is going to take down everything and everyone around town. I also tell you this to keep in mind with the following, I guess everything, following arguments, and that the Tyranids Codex currently has reached a point in which a lot of our models can go to a lot of different detachments. So really listen to what I say and not necessarily as I do, okay? Because the arguments I'll make for probably what I feel will be the best detachment at the end of this, you could try in other detachments. Okay, so keep that in mind. But with that out the way, let's talk about the Screamer Killer. A T9 monster with a 2-up save, 10 wounds, and an 8-inch move. Okay? Now, it has ranged weapon of Bioplasmic Scream, Assault, Blast, 18-inch range, D6 plus 3, hitting on 4s, Strength 8, AP 2, Damage 1. Melee weapons, this is where it gets good. Screamer Killer Talents, Melee, 10 attacks, hitting on 3s, Strength 10, AP 2, Damage 3. The Death Scream is the ability that we all scream for. In your shooting phase, after this model has shot, select one unit hit by one or more of those attacks. That unit must take a Battle Shock test, subtracting 1 from that test. 145 points, Deadly Demise D1. So, if you just like take an eraser and just, act like this part doesn't exist, this package sounds pretty good, right? Now, I would love for this to come down in points, um, eventually before the edition ends, right? I think that there's hope for this model to be playable. Now, it does have a larger footprint, put the arms out and people can shoot at the arms. It's only T9, 2-up save, and only 10 wounds. It doesn't have a feel no pain, doesn't have an invuln to keep you alive. So it's been a thing this entire edition in which you're like, well, I would love to use it, but I can't seem to get it out the board quick enough to justify it in a lot of cases, right? For 145, I'm better off taking an Exocrime for 135. And then there's the matter of where do I even take this? The Screamer Killer is a monster. Great Devourer is every keyword, and the other keyword is Screamer Killer. Alright, so it's not like we're benefiting from too many detachments straight up. But let's walk through a couple and where I think the Screamer Killer has a place. First, we talk about it in Crusher Stampede. This is the one that most people would say it is best in. And I disagree. I am very confused why, but I have a hunch, right? Once you take a wound, it'll have +1 hit, so you will hit with your Bioplasmic Scream easier, and you will be hitting with 10 attacks on 2 for capability of 30 wounds, right? That sounds fine. And you also have access to Rampaging Monstrosities to give it reroll hits. Also pretty cool. But that's fine, right? Like, that's just fine. And then I see that a lot of people don't understand how Savage Roar works, which is where I think the issue lies. Not to say that it's bad in this detachment, but I don't think it's the best detachment for the Screamer Killer. Savage Roar, fight phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets, one Tyranids monster unit from your army that was selected as the target of one or more of the attacking unit's attacks. That enemy unit must take a battle shock test, and until the end of the phase, each time a model in that enemy unit makes an attack that targets your unit, subtract 1 from the hit roll. If that battle shock test was failed, subtract 1 from the wound roll. So, one thing that a lot of people get wrong is not if the target is battle shocked, -1 from wound. No. If that battle shock test was failed, they need to fail this specific test for the -1 to wound. Now, if they rewrite this and say if the target is battle shocked, then we'll be working in business. Then we'll be in business. But until or if that ever happens, uh, that's not what Savage Roar does. Even though Savage Roar would go pretty nice with the Screamer Killer, um, but they didn't do that. Don't know why they didn't do that. Probably for being safe. They were really scared of Crusher Stampede, from what I understand from the veterans being the thing to uh, crush the meta again. So, they played it safe. You have to fail that specific test. So, that's all fine and dandy. Now, I didn't even bother with the rest of it because, as most of us know, when we're talking about a T9 monster with 10 wounds, you will be very lucky to keep this just under below half strength and not dead. All right. So like at its starting, you will have +2 OC, so you go up to 5. That's nice. But you'll be hard pressed to get this to stay alive at 1 to 4 wounds. Okay. Then we go to the detachment that is, in my opinion, the best one for it, Synaptic Nexus. Now, Synaptic Nexus gives it pretty much everything it wants. You can have +1 to advance and charge rolls. You can't advance and charge, but it has an assault weapon, so you can advance and shoot. And it's a melee monster, so there's the charge if that's the turn, whichever one you want. It doesn't have an invuln, and it's kind of squishy, but you can get an invuln, a 5 up, and +1 to melee is the thing that I actually care the most about. So there's that too, right? And not to mention, of course, Smothering Shadow. Any phase just after an enemy unit fails a battle shock test, one Synapse unit from your army within 12 inches of that enemy unit rolls 66 for each 3 up. That enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wound. Screamer Killer fires away at something, you have some Synapse thing next to that. If they fail the battle shock test, do some mortal wounds. Pretty nice, pretty simple. You also have access to Irresistible Will, your shooting phase, or the fight phase. One Synapse unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot or fight this phase. One enemy unit within 24 inches of and visible to the Synapse unit. Till the end of the phase, each time a friendly Tyranid model makes an attack that targets that enemy unit, if the attacking model's unit is within 6 inches of your Synapse unit, re-roll a hit roll of 1 and re-roll a wound roll of 1. So, hits and wounds, re-rolls next to Synapse, which is what you want to do when you have Smothering Shadow. Now, those quickly out the way, I'd be hard-pressed to explain to you why, for the purposes of what I'm thinking with the Screamer Killer, you wouldn't immediately just go, well, I just want it in Synaptic Nexus, right? Like, you've given me the answer. Yes and no, because here's the other problem. And by telling you this, maybe it'll click why I'm not saying to put it in here. I like finding how units can work without the entire list dedicated to making it work, okay? There's a difference between something going into something that already works or making something work. I hope that makes sense, and I probably will butcher this for the rest of this explanation of like trying to clarify that. But again, as I said earlier, you can put a lot of these pieces into any of the detachments. So if you go, nah, I heard what you said, but I still want to do that in Synaptic Nexus instead, I can't blame you. Okay, I can't blame you. Makes sense. But with that out the way, let's talk about what you'll probably put this in together with. Most people want the Scream Battleshock test, so of course they want Neurolictor. Neurolictor, don't need to worry about any of this. We're talking about Psychological Saboteur, the aura in which while an enemy unit is within a foot of this model, if it is Battleshocked, it is making attacks at -1 to hit, and in each time a friendly Tyranids model makes an attack that targets that unit, add 1 to the wound roll. So, you know how it goes. Neurolictor Aura is out within a foot. You Screamer Killer. Hopefully they fail that Battle Shock test at -1. And then there you go. +1 to wound for everybody else to go into it. And that's fine, right? And that's part one of what, we're aiming for, okay? That already can tell you, yeah, I can still just put this in Synaptic Nexus. I can put this into Crusher Stampede if I'm already +1 to hit, and I throw this in, and I'll have +1 to wound for my other things. This is still fine, and which I will tell you, that's why I kinda like the Neurolictor into Crusher Stampede list every now and again, not every Crusher Stampede list I write, but for the purposes of, well, if I'm already +1 to hit, I might as well try to be +1 to wound as well. So there's that. And going on to another monster that benefits from it, here's the other angle. Neurotyrant, and of course probably bringing the Zoanthropes. With the Neurotyrant, again, blah di da di da, however, node last psychic, while this model is leading a unit, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, add 1 to the hit roll. If the target is battle shocked, add 1 to the wound roll as well. I've talked about this kind of at length before, so I won't spend too much time on it. But at the core of this ability, you just want something battle shocked. And why I don't love the Neurolictor for this purpose is because the Neurolictor is already making whatever it is +1 to wound. Okay? This isn't generating the test. This one is. But again, if it gets Battle Shock, that means any of my shit is at +1 to wound. And until you can stack +1 wounds somehow, some way, uh, it's not needed, right? I could spend this on something outside of the Neurolictor aura for that, right? So that's where I would like the Screamer Killer for the Neurotyrant, and they both benefit. Where also, because of the Neuroloids, you put Synapse on one of your little monsters or one of your units, right? And up to 18, or you do this, send it out at 18 inches command phase. Until the start of your next command phase, they are within Synapse. And thanks to the change to Synapse, it is +1 to strength and melee, right? So that means that now we're 10 attacks, hitting on threes, strength 11, AP2, damage 3. That's pretty chunky, and in turn, I'm making my Neurotyrant and the Zoanthropes +1 to wound, and Neurotyrant is making the Zoanthropes +1 to hit, right? So we all know, we all love, and then also the thing with the Spirit Leech aura is that while an enemy unit is within 6 inches of this unit, if this unit contains a Neurothrope, each time that enemy unit fails a Battle Shock test, it suffers D3 mortal wounds, and one model in this unit regains up to D3 lost wounds. This is another synergy, yes and no. They also have Warp Field, which will give Tyranids units within 6 inches of this unit a 6-up invulnerable save. If you are escorting your Think Tank with a Screamer Killer around, the Screamer Killer not only is +1 for the melee strength, It now has a 6-up invuln, so it will always have a save. Probably was going to do that anyway. Like, there's not too much AP 5 and 6 out here, but, extra bonus there. And it can kind of block. For the other thing is that you never want your think tank in combat, ideally, right? So what'll happen is things will try to get into melee with it, but if there is a monster with arms spread wide catching whatever tries to get to it, yeah, and it's a melee monster, yeah, they're in for a bad time. So it's nice that they're buddies like that. But where also have I talked about loving the think tank? Something a bit unusual ish, right? I don't like the think tank in Synaptic Nexus too much because none of the bonuses to the um, detachment rule benefit it. Like, just straight up, they don't. I mean, sure, you technically can argue, well, I do have +1 to melee, but again, you don't want them in melee. And if the only other thing that truly, right, besides a double shock, but again, you don't want them that close, ideally, uh, is the fact that I can fall back and shoot, it's not enough for me. You have Irresistible Will to give them full hits and wound rerolls, but a lot of the time you're bringing the exocrine, so again, I can do without that in other detachments. It's just I'm not sold on it being an auto take. I know that Power of the Hive Mind +1 strength and AP for the Neurotyrant, get all that, but I think you'll find that you're sometimes better served in other places, like Crusher Stampede ignores cover type beat. If you finally get something that is trying to fuck you over, -1 to hit and a battle shock test, possibly -1 to wound, do wounds that way. That's just one. But the other one that I like it in is Assimilation Swarm, because I can respawn an infantry model, and would you look at that, Zoanthropes are infantry. They don't stick around very long. Their whole thing is the fact that they get punched pretty easily and they die. So if I can put them into a detachment in which I can bring them back and then have things in place to make them not get punched as easily, such as, I don't know, maybe a unit that give me a feel no pain on top of everything, and I have a way to heal myself on top of that, it's a little bit better. Right? So Assimilation Swarm. But why would I want to take the Screamer Killer into Assimilation Swarm? It doesn't have a way for me to be +1 to hit, and it doesn't necessarily make me more durable by itself, but the things in it does. However, there's also the fact that with 1 CP, I could make those lethal hits. Right? So there's the difference of hitting on 2s and praying for 6s, but we'll get to why I think this one has the missing piece, okay? Assimilation Swarm. We have the melee warriors that are also a melee unit that I think people can understand, do a lot of attacks, especially when attached to the Winged Tyranid Prime, giving them sustained hits 1. You're bringing them an Assimilation Swarm, usually with parasitic biomorphology. And if there's a lot of attacks, increased strength, possibly lethal hits, what if I find a way to put them in a Neurolictor aura? But why would I bring a Neurolictor and Assimilation Swarm? Here we go to the other part of this, okay? Assimilation Swarm, as maybe I've put the Chaos Demons video out by now. If I haven't, spoiler. But Assimilation Swarm follows a similar thing in which you want to control places on the board, i.e., objective markers, so you can do your thing. The easiest way to control objective markers is to have shit on those objective markers before anybody else does. and out OC them. The Neurolictor is a lone up with stealth that can infiltrate, see what I'm going there, and can battle shock things. Okay? And if something is battle shocked, it has 0 OC. So, 0 OC, and I'm on it, or around it, right? That means I control it. Now, mind you, this does take place in my command phase, or your command phase, rather. But when you're the turn player, you can choose which order things happen of command phase. So, Neurolictor, command phase, see if it works out first, then Assimilation Swarm regen. Okay? So there's that, and there's why I would take more melee. Right? And that's just a quick thing. But the other thing about Assimilation Swarm is Brood Guard Impulse. Now, some people I've definitely heard from people more experienced with the detachment than I, in which you don't throw this out all the time, right? Brood Guard Impulse is any phase. One Harvester unit from your army that was just destroyed. You can use this stratagem on that unit even though it was just destroyed. Until the end of the battle, each time a friendly Tyranids model makes an attack that targets the enemy unit that just destroyed your Harvester unit, add 1 to the wound roll. So here comes the maddening part of my idea, okay? If I have Broodguard Impulse making my harvesters, or letting my harvesters kamikaze in a way, in which select units are +1 to wound, and I have the Neurolictor making other things +1 to wound, that means that I'm doing a lot of damage with +1 to wound and things that have a lot of attacks or heavy hitting attacks. So there's on that front, okay? But going on to talking about the harvesters that are needed, let's start with pyrovores. The way that we're thinking about this and to why we got to why, that was a double Y, excuse me, how we ended up in this conversation as to me telling you the Screamer Killer might go in Assimilation Swarm out of everything, is that it is seen as a support piece. And a lot of the support pieces that we have go into Assimilation Swarm. Now, you can take support pieces, of course, and other things. But if I'm looking at the trifecta of -1 to battle shock test +1 to wound, remove the benefit of cover with the pyrovores thanks to burning spray, and your shooting phase after this unit has shot, select one enemy unit hit by one or more of those attacks. Until the end of the phase, that enemy unit cannot have the benefit of cover. And harvesters, another support, being the psychophage, keeping things alive. I think, just like the support class in Apex Legends right now, might be a little bit buffed, okay? A little bit tuned. That's just the theory to bring us to why we're having this discussion, right? Flame Spurt, keep this in mind. Ignores cover, Torrent twin linked, range of 12, d6 +1. It's Torrent, so it's auto hitting. Strength 6, AP 1, damage 1 on a T6, 3 up save, 5 wound body. Why is Twin Link special? That means, just like the melee warriors, I get to reroll my wounds. Oh shit, I get to reroll wounds in a detachment in which I am +1 to wound for a lot of things. Okay? And because I don't care about the actual hitting part because it's a turret, that frees up if I did bring something like an Exocrine for something else, to which I'll talk about that combo very briefly as to why it's not being brought up. Well, I guess now I'm bringing it up. But for a while, the combo is just like, yeah, you take a Neurolictor and the Pyrovore and the Exocrine, and when we were first thinking about the Screamer Killer and the Screamer Killer, and that way you Exocrine. Well, hey, no, back up. You Neurolictor. Wait, no, no. You Pyrovore. No, back. Neurolictor. Okay. Oh, I didn't get the Battle Shock. I remove cover from the thing next to the Neurolictor. Then I shoot it with an Exocrine. And then I get rerolls to hit for my Screamer Killer. So now that I can shoot another thing at that target because it is +1 to wound, ignores cover, and I'm rerolling hits. Like, fuck, that's a lot of fucking work to try to get that shit working, right? And I can understand if you're like, you just removed one monster from this equation. How is this less work? Keep in mind something I said about the other things, right? If I have 3 Pyrovores, they don't all have to hit the same target. And I know that this is a criticism of Assimilation Swarm too, that people are like, I can't be bothered to try to buy all these damn Pyrovore boxes. That's a lot of fucking money. And then I say, you bought 2 and 3 Maliceptors at a time, which are 2 and 3 times the cost of the box for the Pyrovore. So you can do it. And they're in stock more often than the Maliceptor. I believe in you, bud. So if I have 3 Pyrovores, right? And let's just say that the Neurolictor passed, or I guess it made something else fail, a Battle Shock test around it, and then I Screamer Killer another target, I can take my Pyrovores, let's just say I only need 2 for this, right? That are Harvesters, and remove cover from both of those targets, again, in the ideal situation where I have vision of both, but also, I could just take 2 Pyrovores in different locations and do that, right? It doesn't have to be the same unit. So now, 2 targets are +1 to wound, ignoring cover. Okay? And going back to how I like other targets hitting shit, again, follow with me here. It's just a mad idea because we're talking about now the Neurotyrant's other thing that you can do, Psychic Terror. If one or more of models from your army with this ability are on the battlefield when you unleash the Shadow and the Warp, subtract 1 from the Battle Shock test. Each enemy unit in the battlefield must take a test, okay? At most, in the most ideal of situations, again, we are talking optimal, ideal situation, I have a Neurolictor, 3 targets in the aura, okay? -1 test. Some shit fails, some shit passes. I have 3 Pyrovores in Assimilation Swarm because that's probably the only detachment I'm taking more than 2 Pyrovores. Remove cover from them. Right? My Neurotyrant gets to be +1 to wound versus some other shit that failed the test outside of the aura. My Neurolictor has given my other shit +1. My Screamer Killer, other shit +1. Like, there's a lot of shenaniganizing we can do here. But outside of that, I could just, again, without the Neurolictor aura, walk somewhere else, have a Screamer Killer and a Pyrovore. Or make the shit fail with my Screamer Killer because I really don't give that much of a shit about it actually trying to get its ranged attack damage through because I'm hitting on fucking 4s anyway, and it's damage 1. I have that fail somewhere near a Neurolictor. That means that my Pyrovore with a twin-linked Flamer is rerolling wounds while being +1 to wound, ignoring cover. Auto-hitting because it's a Flamer. So, just to show the interchangeability of the order of operations, I guess you could say, as to why we're going and putting the Screamer Killer in this detachment out of all the fucking detachments. Then we go on to the Psychophage. Screamer Killer needs help surviving. Guess who's a Harvester? That also has, well, you look at that, a fucking Flamer. And can give your Screamer Killer better than nothing in terms of survivability. By giving it a 6 up feel no pain thanks to Biostimulus Aura. While a friendly Tyranid unit is within 6 inches of this model, models in that unit have the feel no pain 6 up. 95 points, T9, 3 up save, 10 wounds, 5 up feel no pain for itself. It also has Feeding Frenzy. Each time this model makes a melee attack that targets a unit that is below its starting strength, add 1 to the hit roll. If the target is also below half strength, add 1 to the wound roll as well. So, now that one depends on your opponent being below and starting. So we're not talking about Crusher Stampede type situation here. But the other thing about why you might think about the Screamer Killer in terms of points over the Exocrine. I know. I know what I just said. But just hear me out. Is that going back to what's in this detachment? We have Psychophages. We have Pyrovore so far. Both of them have Flamers. Reroll ones to hit doesn't matter for Flamers. Now, the Exocrine is still a very good unit, but I will say we have seen in some terrain people stop taking as many, and some have even done the radical thing of dropping them all together. So maybe if you're having a hard time finding the Exocrine, but we all know there's a plethora of fucking Screamer Killers about right now, thanks to the Leviathan box and the Horrors of the Hive. I think that's what GW tried to sell it as with the Neurotyrant. You can do it. And hell, if you can find that for cheap, you have 2 parts of the pie. And then the Psychophage also has Anti-Psyker, Devastating Wounds, D6 plus 1 on the attacks plus 1 to hit. You know, plus 1 to wound and having death wounds makes it easier. Now, keep in mind that doesn't mean that you start doing death wounds on 5s. That just means that there's more likely for you to get wounds across the board somehow, some way. And then we go to the Haruspex. Monster, what does the Haruspex have to do with Battle Shock? It doesn't have that. Are you going to tell me you're going to put this in the Neurolictor Aura as well? Not quite. The Haruspex is a Harvester that is T11, 3 up save, 14 wounds. Okay? Pretty girthy for what it is. And thanks to being in Assimilation Swarm, you could give it a 4 up feel no pain, you know, if you're within an objective marker for 2 heaping. And we'll get to the CP part in a second as well. But going back to the Haruspex, it has Grizzly Spectacle. Each time this model is selected to fight after resolving its attacks, if one or more enemy units were destroyed by those attacks, each enemy unit within 6 inches of this model must take a Battle Shock test. It has Ravenous Maw, 14 attacks hitting on 3, strength 7, AP 1, damage 2. It has Sylvan Claws, extra attacks, 4 attacks of those, hitting on 3, strength 14, AP 2, D6 plus 1 damage. With a Screamer Killer, you can Battle Shock something. I know, we've talked about this. And if it's, again, around a Neurolictor, plus 1 to wound. But don't focus on that part too much. We can just remove the Neurolictor for there, but it should be said. You can do that. Looking at just the Screamer Killer Haruspex, you have a lot of decent melee attacks. But you also have a very dangerous game for your opponent to play. If you Battle Shock something with the Screamer Killer, and maybe you don't dedicate any other ranged attacks to it, you know, just out there, right? You had to shoot something and you just so happen to Battle Shock it after. You also have the Haruspex, where if they failed that test, they can't use stratagems against the attacks that are incoming from your Screamer Killer and or Haruspex. probably your Haruspex, because if your Haruspex eats that eats that unit alive, you trigger another Battle Shock test for other shit within 6 inches, and if that unit is Battle Shocked once again around a Neurolictor, because I want the infiltrating and the +1 to wound while I'm in the detachment that can give shit +1 to wound, yeah, they're fucked. And it's a chain of events. And again, so far, I have, again, in my opinion, just I have to keep saying that so it's not too. This person said this is what's good. This is what I think is okay. A reason to bring Pyrovores, a reason to bring Psychophages, for the Screamer Killer, and the Neurolictor, and because I've brought those two already, I might as well see what's going on in the Assimilation Swarm. Oh, look, the Haruspex, this could be a chain of events of Battle Shock test. And then it makes my other shit better once more. Now, going to the Neurotyrant once more, we're in Assimilation Swarm. And what people have been doing in Assimilation Swarm is bringing a fuck ton of Tyrant Guard instead of the Zoanthropes. If they are +1 to wound and +1 to hit for their melee attacks, maybe you put Parasitic Biomorphology on the Neurotyrant instead of the melee warriors, so that now any of these become just a little bit more dangerous with +1 strength for both Synapse and from Parasitic Biomorphology, and bonus attacks. And Twin Linked. Yeah, for T8, 3 of say 4 wound bodies. You have that play as well if you want to go down this rabbit hole. And now we talk about the CP part. You could bring the Hive Tyrant, you could bring the Swarm Lord. Let those both come up. And you can even bring the Winged Hive Tyrant in this detachment to round shit out. If you want to go more on the Tyrant Guard side, there you go. You now give your Screamer Killer around the Hive Tyrant with these Tyrant Guard lethal hits on its screen that were just throwing out, but lethal hits is better than no lethal hits. It already has assault, don't worry about it. Swarm Lord, this is looking like a melee detachment, and I've gone over why the Swarm Lord is good for melee. If you bring that on the Tyrant Guard focus, well, guess what? You don't really need to worry about the CP situation because this detachment, where'd I put you, doesn't have many things that you'll use every round. Like you can use Secure Biomass, and if you have the bonus CP for Brewgar Impulse, that's fine. But outside of that, you're not aiming to use Reclaim Biomass every turn, Rapacious Hunger, Tyrannoformed, and if you stack the CP, you can eventually get to a Blade of Carapace. So, you can bring those too on the Swarm Lord. And even with the Winged Hive Tyrant, I won't give out so maybe I'll just move on so I don't give away any secrets that have happened in the comment section. And I shouldn't say, I don't think I'll say the name, that way their technique isn't trackable right now. But I'll say you can even bring the Winged Hive Tyrant. If you're watching this and you know what knew who I'm talking about, and want to reveal it, go ahead. But I'll leave your technology to you right now until I guess I ask if I can put that in video. But you can even bring the Winged Hive Tyrant for deep striking shenanigans and minus subtracting some attacks within Assimilation Swarm. Now, that's a lot of reasons to take all of these models together and why they can all go in Assimilation Swarm, no? You even have shit like the Ripper Swarms that you can just throw to get Brewgar Impulse for some other shit to be wounded. And then finally, hey, not you. Where'd you go? Boo doo 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 doo. No, I've misplaced you. Biovores. Thank you. You're already bringing Biovores into every list. What does this have to do with everything? Well, don't worry about the mines, except for if we're throwing shit and letting it be expendable and racking up points because we're bringing shit like Ripper Swarms for it to be expendable. The other thing about reclaimed biomass that, well, I said don't worry about it, is that thanks to Biovores, you can put out those spores, and when that spore gets destroyed, you can use reclaimed biomass, one harvester unit from your army that is within 6 inches of that destroyed unit, and regenerate some shit. So, you filled out the list pretty nicely with all of these together. Now, probably have to pick and choose because we have gone through a lot of points, but all of this is to say that the Screamer Killer might be the missing piece for Assimilation Swarm. Is it missing in the sense that nobody has done well with it? No. But I know people don't want to run too many Pyrovores, so if you have 3, I think that's enough. If you have 2, probably also enough. Psychophages are cheap. Haruspex, I'm still trying to get people to understand that it's a pretty darn good unit for 125 points. But even if you don't want to run it that way, you have another cheap melee option that can kind of just relay race some shit. Just hand off the baton to some battle shock tests. Oh, I was battle shocked. No, the Haruspex. Oh shit, now my other shit is battle shocked. That's the combo piece that we're looking for on that one. And when shit's battle shocked, it can get punched by Tyrant Guard attached to a Neurotyrant. It can get shot by Zoanthropes attached to a Neurotyrant. There's a lot of play for a lot of these things, and you can bring back that shit because we're in Assimilation Swarm. So yeah, if you like the video, like it. Got a comment for me, comment. And until next time, peace out, my monstrosities.